first of all, may I say that I'm glad that we reached consensus this afternoon on the critical issue of energy market, energy prices, security of supply. It was a long meeting and a significant drafting process, but we reached a consensus in the end, which I think is important. The Commission has been tasked with a significant amount of work, both in terms of the decoupling of gas from the overall energy pricing mechanism. Now that work is underway, and the Commission will be back in May in relation to that, which I think is a fundamental issue in terms of how the gas market, the energy market is designed at the moment. But in more short term, the Commission has been asked to look at various other factors such as price capping and so on, if that can have, and how that would have an impact in terms of reducing prices at the moment. So I think all member states are seized at the continuing increase in energy prices and what mechanisms can best be deployed. We tabled an amendment to make sure that any measures that we might take would that once the crisis is over, that we would return to the status quo. So that will enable us to engage with the Commission in terms of the application of the Energy Tax Directive and the VAT Directive. But it's progress, but there's more work to be done in terms of the technical details of all of that. I think overall there's very strong consensus around maintaining the pressure on Russia, and in particular the opening statement of the conclusions really says that there's a very strong commitment to reduce dependency on Russian gas and oil and coal, and I think that represents a very fundamental shift which is brought about by this war.
But there's still no sanctions, is that correct? There's been no fifth sanctions package signalled or signed off tonight?
Not tonight. Today was more on the energy, although I think there can be further sanctions on individuals and so forth, but sanctions will be kept under constant review. But also the point has been made, I think correctly by the Commission, that we do need to now drill down and make sure that any loopholes that exist in relation to the sanctions, or that sanctions are not being circumvented, that we make sure that the most severest and unprecedented sanctions which have been deployed, that they're fully implemented and fully put through.
Taoiseach, that deal today, the US and the EU over the LNG, does that mean that the LNG gas between the EU and the US,
yes.
Does that mean that the EU can be closer to sanctioning Russia on gas because it's got less reliance? And are you secure that Ireland's going to pursue, in terms of sanctions, that Ireland implements the sanctions perfectly?
Yes, we're no holds barred in terms of implementing the sanctions, and there can be no hiding place for anybody in terms of the full impact of these sanctions. I'm very, very clear about that. We would have called originally for the widest possible level of sanctions in the shortest possible time to have the maximum pressure on the Russian Federation to cease hostilities, to stop this terrible war. And we have to remind ourselves of how terrible and barbaric this war is on so many people living in Ukraine and fleeing Ukraine, and the impact it's having on their lives and the trauma that's being created. It's quite shocking.
The deal between the US and the EU?
The deal between the US and Europe is to be welcomed because it represents the beginning of a fairly comprehensive programme of reducing dependency in the first instance. That will take a period of time because some member states are more dependent than others on Russian gas and oil, but it is a very significant agreement between the United States and the European Union, and one can see further work. Germany and other countries are very, very clear. They've already started. They're doing this comprehensively about reducing dependency on Russian gas and oil. We're not as dependent. UK, Norway are suppliers, and therefore, but nonetheless, there's a broader stability around the market in Europe that we're interested in, and clearly the price issue is one that's bearing down on consumers and industry.
Two quick points. For clarity, the VAT issue, you say you tabled an amendment which will help, which will facilitate the negotiating talks with the Commission on that issue, one. Secondly, the Biden LNG initiative, your Cork colleague, Billy Kelleher, talks about the relationship with Ballylongford. Ireland doesn't have a point where we could take advantage of that doesn't that make the Ballylongford development all the more urgent?
Well, first of all, any project of that kind is going to take some time in any event. Now, the programme for government is clear in terms of LNG, in terms of imported fracked gas, but not any supplies that would emanate from sources other than fracked is not contrary to the programme for government. So, for us, I think the immediate objective would be to try and stabilise the market more across Europe. I mean, the LNG is a significant factor in the European Union's response in terms of getting alternative supplies, not just from the US but from other sources. We do not have LNG infrastructure capacity. It could be developed, and I think it's something we do have to look at now, given the changed circumstances. But it's not something that's going to sort things out in the immediate future.
Taoiseach, if I could ask two quick questions.
Sorry, yeah, I thought you explained it yourself very well. But just to say to you that what that basically means is that we were anxious that if we want the flexibility, is that if we reduce excise duties below and VAT below a certain level, that we don't, because we have a derogation, we don't want to end up going back up to 23%, and that's what the legislative framework ordains at the moment. So we've, in the conclusions today, we've put in a paragraph that enables us to engage with the Commission in terms of exploiting the flexibilities to the fullest degree possible.